Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. In this episode, I'm joined by Heather Sidorowicz, owner of Southtown Audio Video in Hamburg, New York. She's also a Residential Tech Today contributing writer, former CEDIA board member, and most importantly, a good friend for many years. Heather, it's taken too long for me to have you on the podcast, so I'm really happy to have you. Thanks for joining us.
I'm thrilled. I'm really excited that we get to hang out.
Absolutely. And, we'll probably end up talking a lot about fun stuff as well as business stuff, because that's the way it is with friends. But I wanted to dive right in to talk about, how did we meet? How did we start working together? What is your memory of how it all came together for us?
All right. So here's my memory. So a few years ago, actually it's like many years ago now, CEDIA had this competition. They called it the CEDIA Tweeps competition. And they chose 10 people from across the country. I think that was before they were global. And what you won was your hotel at CEDIA. And so I was super excited to enter this. And it was about, if you won this competition, one of 10, you talked about how great CEDIA was on Twitter and social media. And that helped them obviously get more people to register. So I was chosen. I didn't really know that many people at the time. And also John Siaka was chosen. So he said to me, like, hey, I want to get to know everybody who's been chosen. Can you write a little bit about yourself, where you came from? Now, I thought I wrote probably multiple paragraphs, and it probably exists somewhere on the ether for John. And really, he was just looking for a few sentences. And so John said, hey, it's kind of a knack for this writing thing. I'd love, you should do more. And I said, absolutely not. I'm a terrible speller. I'm not a writer. You're wrong. And I remember him saying, it's funny because you have those those memories of where where you were. I remember I was at like swim lessons for my kids at the time.
That's funny.
And he said, hey, I showed this to my editor and he's really interested. And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy, this
and who is that really smart editor guy? Who is that?
You.
That was me.
So
awesome.
Yeah, so you said, well, I usually can give you an idea and we'll see if that idea works. And then, I don't know, I heard on the radio that year they had added the term man cave to the encyclopedia and to the dictionary. And I thought, well, that's kind of silly to me. And so I wrote the article that said the man cave is dead. Now the concept, if you read the article, was the term man cave, right? Like everybody's watching it, the family spaces, but just the name of the article was the man cave is dead. Well, lo and behold, that ended up being like one of the most popular articles of the year. And you said to me, write for me anytime. You don't have to bring it, you don't have to give me ideas first. So that was my first venture into writing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was racking my brain for how it all started, and I knew it happened through writing, and that you were writing for us before I really knew you personally. But
and you got like a lot of flack from that too, I believe.
Well, and it goes back to headline writing. Headlines can be so controversial, and then you get into the story, and it's not really that. It's just a shortcut to get to the point, and people didn't want it to be like, first you take away our home theater trend and now you're going to take away our man cave. It's like the only thing we're making money off of right now, and that's where it went. And it wasn't about that. It was just kind of like, that term is so gross, like nobody likes it. I mean, was it the she shed now?
Right, she shed.
Right. But it's just dumb. It's just marketing. But so what happened though was it's amazing because Malcolm Gladwell, the author, is. He's the 10,000 hours guy and all that. He's kind of one of these guys that analyzes statistics and comes up with trends and ways to analyze how our society works. And one of the things he talked about in the book, The Tipping Point, which you've heard probably referenced a lot as just a generic thing, the tipping point on a trend or whatever, was this idea of connectors. And I believe John Siaka is a connector.
No, he's the apex.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple things that have happened, but two of the major ones for me as an editor were him sort of validating Todd Puma, who at first I was like, I'm not sure what to make of this guy. He's kind of like this New Jersey hyperkinetic kind of personality, and I'm not sure I have the energy for him as an editor. And I don't know if his writing's really what we want. And then John interviewed him and it sort of like validated him. And I thought, okay. And then John is always like the worst critic of the people that he sort of endorses because he's jealous and he wants to be the only writer. So he makes these things happen. I know he's not, I might have
John, don't listen to this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So then you were another one at that
around the same time. Yeah.
So the great thing was when we were in Denver, I think it was, and we had a dinner together, and it was just, this was many years later, but
I felt like I was with celebrities. I remember like we walked from like the CEDIA award show and we had burgers or something.
Oh, well, that was in Indianapolis. That was a big deal for me because that was the year that I feel like all I do is now talk about my CEDIA fellow, like I'm like bragging, but
it's so cool.
It was a major memory for me. And that night I was able to share it actually with my wife who attended the CEDIA
she was
Awards,
there.
Karen, and she never goes to any industry events. And it was just a big deal that night. And there you were. And I believe Brian was with us.
Brian was there too.
Your sister,
my husband.
Even. Yeah, Brian, your husband, and your sister was there as well. So she was still working with you, and so that was a really cool night. And you were making such a ridiculous big deal about being in the presence of celebrity. Yeah, we were just because
there's some things about high school that are just always inherent, right? When you someone says, "Hey, you want to sit at my table?" When you're at a networking event, I'm like, "Yes, thank you."
Yeah. But for me, it was always so hard to get to know people who I had a relationship through just the writing, the editing. I rarely made that leap to sort of becoming social friends, at events, because it's just not my personality type. Like kind of keep people at
and look at you now, you're on podcasts, and everything. You're so outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, it is out of my comfort zone, but I'm still in my own surroundings, so I'm able to make it work. Anything to not go to an event in person, I'm good. Like this has been the.
You would be on stage. You were very nervous.
What's that?
You would be on stage. You were very nervous.
Oh, yeah. That was always, very, very taxing for me. But anyway, that sort of all came together. But the dinner I was talking about was a couple of years past that, when we kind of had a little reunion with John and Todd, and we went out in Denver, and it was just the four of us. There's a picture that came up recently on Facebook that I reposted because of all of our CEDIA memories would come up, and that was really cool because then we were all just sort of on the same, we there's no more celebrity worshiping. It was just we were all happy to be friends and get together.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way. But I did want to talk about your background because your story about how you became a company owner is really cool, and we'll get there. But I wanted to talk about your personal background before you kind of got into the industry. What were you doing that led you to the CEDIA business?
Gosh. Okay. So I secretly, I went to college. I was a theater major. So I was an actor.
Oh, okay.
And realized, I think my junior or senior year, I really don't want to live paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And so tried to get a marketing minor at that point, did an internship with the marketing department, but didn't want to stay in school either. So my clever thing I would put on my resume after that was, I have a theater major, but a concentration in marketing. So I was like making up my own terms. I went into development for a while. And then after 9/11 happened, I was at the American Heart Association at the time, and they lost the funding. So I lost my job and I was unemployed for a while. So, I think like so many people are going through this sort of thing now.
Yeah.
And not really sure what I wanted to do with my life at all. So I had some sales background. I actually sold pagers for a while, which was actually my funny story on that is they had come out with a pager, and this had to be around the year 2000, okay. And you could email it to the pager versus just leave the number for the kids listening who don't remember what a pager is.
Mm-hmm.
Call it, and then you could put your phone number in, and then eventually they would call you back.
Right.
And it was email. And then so I came up with the slogan, email from the palm of your hand. And they flew it around the Bills Stadium. I got tickets to the Bills. And then the company went out of business because nobody wanted pagers. And who would have these devices that you would email to? Well, lo and behold, a few years later, iPhone, smartphones.
Yeah.
So I I think around that same time, my father, who had owned Southtown Audio Video at the time, invited Brian and I to CES. So way before I understood what it was. That was back in like, I remember we went to, after when we went back to like the show another day because they were giving away a Palm Pilot.
Oh,
And
okay.
who's the best? Palm OS. I still have that phrase in my head. Like, who's the best Palm OS?
Yeah.
And so I guess I almost joke, like I said to my father, like, were you incepting me back then? And he's like, no, it was just fun to travel with you.
Okay.
But it was kind of like he did, right? So I didn't even know that I was interested, except I was becoming interested. So
a little side note, by the way, I have a memory of having a handspring, which is like the Palm Pilot competitor that, of course, I had the lame, off-brand version of it. And I went to a CES with that, and I thought, I'm going to have my schedule on this thing. And it was me sitting at a busy press lunch, with a million people in a tent going, this thing, I don't even understand how the lettering, like, how do I draw on this thing to make letter? It was terrible. Like I that was definitely like
8 hours and how to learn to use it.
Oh yeah. It was like a connecting technology that just wasn't meant to last.
Wasn't there yet,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Yeah, and then there's the famous story that I've told so many times. So I'm sorry if you've heard this before, other people who are listening. But I went to a home show around that same time that I was unemployed or working, doing some side jobs, and saw another AV company who was doing a surround sound demo. Now, surround sound was something I was familiar with because I grew up with it. I remember laying on the floor with my father's huge subwoofer rattling and laser discs, right? So I saw all those technologies happening. Laser discs where it would end and you'd have to get up and you have to flip the laser disc and sit back down and watch the rest of your movie.
Yeah.
But it was, this groundbreaking technology at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But so this was a demo of the Matrix, and everybody dies in the Matrix unless you see the Matrix, and then they're not really people. And I remember seeing the kids watching this thinking like, maybe that's not super smart decision.
Right.
And I thought, I think I could do this, and I think I could do it better. And
be more family oriented with the way you present
a different approach from what this, just it sounds great.
Right.
And therefore you should buy it. So so I called my dad and said, I think I want to hang out with you. And
well, so your dad, when he founded the company, was in 1984, was he was really into satellite TV installation?
He was.
Stuff?
So he was he did audio for a band. He was just like an audio. He actually even he was in Vietnam, so he was a vet, and he came back and he had, I think he worked on like I want to say walkie-talkies, but like CB radios, whatever
Sure.
So he had like some technology experience in that, even back in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And so when he came back, he worked for another company and joked with a friend, like, maybe I'll start my own company. And his boss heard him say that and said, okay, you're fired. Oh. And so he said, okay, I guess I'm going to do this.
Okay.
And so there's some like fun stories about, he bought everything on credit at the time, and the alarm wasn't up and running yet. So he would sleep overnight there until the alarm was working. I mean, like, because this is before computers and all that, right? Yeah. So it is definitely, this company is found on his blood, sweat, and tears, and all of those.
So when you saw this, went to this home show, how far along was his evolution as a company from where he'd started?
Pretty far, right? So he had gone from a hi-fi shop is what he opened, big tower speakers, and he was really smart to change and evolve. He rented out beta and VHS tapes. And I remember, like, Be Kind, Rewind. And he would, after school, I would rewind tapes, the people who were not kind and did not rewind. Okay. He sold big satellite dishes. And I remember as a kid, all the bars would call him and be like, hey, Tommy, like, what satellite's the game going to be on today? And it would drive my mom crazy. We got an unlisted number, which was a big deal back then. And then I would have friends over and we would switch from like G1 to F1, and you'd run outside and look up so you can watch the satellite dish slowly turn. Cool. Because we didn't have electronics. We didn't have iPhones to play on back then. Uh-huh. You're in the country. Right. And then small satellite dishes. And so when I got there, it was small satellite dishes. He was selling like Sony Vega TVs. They were flat screens, right? When they went from curved to like flat and 300 pounds. And it was really kind of before home theater was catching on. Like, so I was there for that beginning. And I remember locals was a huge deal. Oh, local channels on satellite finally.
Oh, okay.
So, and I've been part of the other changes since.
So were you, what were you doing as I guess you saw this opportunity with, the Matrix, that part of the story. So this was.
Yeah, I had no idea what to do from there. So
Okay.
he put a desk in the speaker listening room,
Okay.
and I read magazines, and I tried to come. I mean, this is really as the internet is even starting, right? I remember, we bought through a distributor back then called Perfect 10, and if you put in Perfect 10, it was not the website that you would think it was. It was like perfect10.tv, which was sometimes I think they did that on purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, so and going to CEDIAs, and that's really where I got my CEDIA feet wet, because I would go with so much excitement and thirst for knowledge. That's really where I would learn. Each year I would take a different, 1 year I would do it on, okay, I'm gonna do all the audio listening classes. Okay, this year I'm gonna do everything about video. This year I'm gonna do stuff about business. And so every year I would go, I would just take as many classes as I could, and just get as much knowledge as I could, talk to as many people as I could. So that's why I think I'll always have that connection in my heart, because that's where I learned. My dad is a tough guy. So he's not like the arm around you, let me teach you everything I know. It was kind of more trial by fire.
Right. So
and then he could trust me. So he'd be like, I'm going to go, and he might not come back. And people come in and ask questions like, I don't know, but I'll find out.
Let me look it up in this magazine. Maybe it's in here. So you're sitting at this desk. Would customers actually come in and you engage with them?
And this is back in the days, like you'd bring the chair and you'd bring your CD in. You're like, I'm gonna listen to the whole CD because I need to understand these speakers.
Oh, okay.
Like just sitting there typing away.
Okay. So you eventually bought the company from your dad. So how did that part of the evolution happen?
In 2012, I had gone through this business class and through a university here called the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. And at that time, there was a 0% chance I was ever going to purchase the company. But I just learned that I had more value than I think I realized I had. And going through that class, they ask a lot of questions about your finances. When's the last time you looked at a balance sheet? When's the last time you looked at your profit and loss? And I hadn't ever seen any of those things. So that just forced me to look at the business from a very different perspective, not just how big of a sale can I make.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of it by then. I was already managing and hiring and firing, and I had changed the direction a little bit at that time. And so after all of that, I just went home to my husband and said, I don't know. And he said, just let's make an offer. And so we made an offer, and we did some back and forth. And 2014, purchased the company outright.
I love that it's like a negotiation with your dad.
It was a negotiation, and it wasn't, I love my father. We get along really well now, but it was not easy, and it was not sunshines and roses. There was times that he wasn't speaking to me. It was it was tough. It was a dark time to go through that. And because it was who he was, it wasn't, it was
his identity.
His identity was really tied up in that.
Well, how was he getting near retirement age, at least at that point?
Oh yeah, he's like in his 70s now. So 6 years ago he was 65-ish, maybe past 65. So certainly at the age, and it was so I purchased the company outright in 2014, and then the property that it's on a year later. So there's certainly a nice retirement in that.
Okay. So he was a landlord as well for a little while you were owning the business that it was on. Yeah. But so he's got something solid to live off of from that, and you did it in the right way. You weren't just handed the keys to the business.
No, I was not handed the keys to the gas. And I think that a lot of second generations almost expects that to happen. Or you wait till that happens. Oh, well, if something happens, it will be mine. And I remember someone saying to me, like, you have no right to this.
Yeah, I agree with that approach. And I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, shocking to hear, but totally, absolutely correct.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that was it hard for him to not hang around after it wasn't his?
It was. That transition was definitely hard to find, like the right place for him and the right wage for him. And now we're at a good space. Like, so now he kind of peters around. He doesn't have to come in. So there's not the extra stress of like, I have to get this done. But then he still has a place to go, and he comes in for the coffee and the donut and Monday meeting.
So he was an employee after the purchase.
He was, yeah. He's down. He's still on, but not much, like a day a week.
Yeah. He's weaning himself off of the need to be there. Yeah, that's got to be tough. So what were some of the things you were able to do once you owned it, actually, and weren't having to basically butt heads with your dad about what to do?
So there's some really big pieces. So during that time, a Walmart had opened up down the street, and we had about 20, 25 displays, TVs here, and 2 different surround sound systems and all that jazz. And you could just see retail was changing, right? People who, they used to come in 6 different times to look at different TVs side by side and have a big conversation about what's the difference between standard definition and high definition. And so we had grown through all of that. I had done back at that same home show courses on teaching other people about what the difference was. What's the difference between plasma and LCD? All the great, amazing things people used to think about plasma, that it had to be refilled or it leaked or it would, all sorts of fun stuff.
Right.
And then seeing that retail was changing, Amazon obviously growing at that same time, I feel it's like about 2 years ago now, we closed our retail doors and decided to become appointment only. And that had to do a lot with, before that we had closed Saturdays and we stopped being open till 8 o'clock. And it took years to get there. At that same time, our commercial business was growing.
Right.
So we grew up certainly as a residential business, but Buffalo was starting to have a renaissance. There was a new medical campus going in. There's a lot of building happening, and could see, there could be a place here. And because we offered commercial business the same type of attention that we did with residential business, we doubled in 1 year. That was 2015. Unexpectedly, we didn't expect to grow that big and that fast. And that was another fun, overwhelming piece to go through. But people really do. People want to be treated well. It doesn't matter whether you're a part of $1 billion company or you're, just getting some Sonos installed in your house. They just, so that was, I think, something we unexpected. So we kind of pulled back, put ourselves back together again. And now we continue to grow, mostly in the commercial market. And then what we call relationship residential, which means it's a 2-way street. We're gonna have a long-term relationship. It's not just installing a TV, although sometimes it is, but it's more often an entire room, or I'm buying a new house or something beyond that, beyond product.
Right. And so you've built, like everything, you built relationships on that commercial side, and having those, the chances to kind of build off of each project, right? That's got to be a part of it, but you also have to know about technologies that are different than the residential side.
Absolutely. I think that it's about selling solutions, not products. It's about, going to the shows when we could go to shows, and we're making sure that you're always selling the right thing, that you don't get caught in, I just rinse and repeat, but am I solving the right problem? Am I listening? I remember early in CEDIA land, someone saying, do great work, you always have more business. And I live by that. I always want to be able to sleep at night. I always want to have a great culture. Those are the most important things to me. And if that organic growth continues to happen, that's great. But I don't need to take over the world in an angry sort of way.
Right. Well, I want to continue our conversation and definitely start talking about your writing part of what you do, and a little bit more of our relationship there. But first, I need to take a short break for our sponsor.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Residential Tech Talks. Today's show is brought to you by WhyReboot. WhyReboot specializes in creating commercial-grade networks that address the demand of advanced control and automation technologies for residential, commercial, and luxury marine environments. WhyReboot systems are comprised of the best gear in the industry, including the Paramount Access Point Mount, developed for integrators and interior designers. To learn more, go to whyreboot.com and accesspointmount.com.
Welcome back. I'm talking to Southtown audio video owner and Residential Tech Today contributing writer, Heather Sidorowicz. Heather, you were a member of the CEDIA board not too long ago, and I believe I was also there for your first meeting in Indianapolis as a member of the board. Is that correct? Was I there?
That is correct. You were there.
That's weird because I don't typically go to those meetings, but because I knew you would be there, I knew we would have some other, there were several members of the board there that I knew very well. And it would just seem like a good chance to catch up. And then that's where Tabitha was named, Tabitha O'Connor was named CEO. So that was also a very notable moment in CEDIA history, I guess. What did you, I know that it's hard to talk about CEDIA board stuff. It's often not public information, but what did you find that you got out of that experience as far as your volunteerism? Because you've been a very active CEDIA volunteer prior to that.
I had been on their judging panel. I had been their membership chair. I had done many different things throughout the years leading up to that moment. And there had not been a female on the board for, it was 15 plus years. And I'm a big proponent of, be the change you want to see in the world. So I believe I was nominated by Joe Whitaker, and I remember having this really big conversation with my husband. My kids were still young. They still are young, but younger. And, hey, this is going to be a commitment. I'm going to have to be part of this if we go for this. And he was great. Go for it. I support you. It was a learning experience. I've been on boards before locally. The whole yay or nay thing, the passing resolutions. I understand the concept of it. I think what I learned most from the CEDIA board was no one could speak, could invoke the change. It was that board has to speak as one, or is supposed to speak as one. And there's an outer board and an inner board. So that's not a secret. Anyone can see that that's
like the executive committee
together. Yeah. So there's an executive committee. That committee actually, because it power controls, is actually the one making those bigger decisions. So I think to make a big difference on the board, you'd commit multiple years. You'd have to do more than one term. And I just didn't, as my business was growing, I only did one term. I pulled out after that. But before I pulled out, I made sure there was some pretty great people I personally nominated and talked to. So Jamie Briesmeister's on there, Amanda Wildman. Both of these women are fierce and amazing and strong. Yeah. So, part of me, it was sad because I would have loved to be on with them. I was the only one in the beginning. When CEDIA joined globally, Melanie was brought in from the UK, but we weren't close. Like, we didn't know each other super well, and we would see each other, I think 4 times a year. There was change bubbling then, and now I think we're seeing some of that change now.
Yeah, I mean, clearly a big deal at the time was Tabitha being a female CEO. That was a huge female presence. But you've played this role of being this female representative of the industry, and it is hard to find owners, of custom integration. So you a lot of husband and wife teams, that sort of thing. But you're always really quick to say, people should be judged on their merits, not make this about gender or whatever.
Right. I want to win the sandbox with everybody.
Yeah. So I love that you play this really pivotal role, important role, and people try to put you in this, like, we need a female voice, and I am. I feel like I'm almost doing that too.
Me a female voice. I mean, at the end of the day, it's true, right? I was the first female that did that, and that was great. And I'm happy to be that person to invoke that change. But when people say, like, oh, how can we get more women in and hire them? Like, it's not a tough piece to do that. And I wouldn't say hire them over somebody else that might have more credentials, but there's a lot of females out there that I think don't even know that this is a job opportunity.
Right.
So I've done that. So I'll bring my sister into that mix. My sister was a head chef, and I think I just lost someone, and she said, hey, I think that I might be interested in what you do. And that was around the same time I bought the company. And I said, okay, well, on your days off, come and check it out. Like you did. And she was at the installer side. Mm-hmm. So she was great at it. She was fantastic with customers, brought her in, and she was with SAV for 5.5 years. And she went off into the pro AV side. So it's not that she didn't even leave the industry. So here's someone who is used to working nights and weekends and holidays and hot kitchens and thrilled to come over to the other side of
Sure.
mostly, 9 to 5, some extended days, but, and did great. She was, and now she's gone beyond. So I think that, it has to do more with somebody's attitude and you can teach the rest.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Jamie is a great example. Breezemeister. She's again with her husband. That's a situation like you described. Amanda Wildman. She's a great representative of the industry as well. And then you start talking to people who are more in marketing roles in the company, and that's good too. I mean, frankly,
Absolutely.
it doesn't have to be an owner. It's just having that voice in there and that perspective that you don't always have. And like, I happen to have been raised by a single mom, so have a very female sort of sensibility in a lot of the ways that I think, and I have to actually kind of work harder to be friends with guys because I don't really know how to hang with guys. I'm not a guy that talks about cars and even with the tech stuff, I don't get into the tech as much as it's the experience. And so I think that when I stop and think, okay, this is how a typical guy is going to sell this thing, that's not always the way it works. It doesn't always affect people the same way. They like glaze over if you start talking about the capabilities of the technology. And I glaze over sometimes when I'm hearing about all that stuff. So it's like, what's it actually achieving overall? And not that you can't handle all that other stuff too. It's just that you think about it from both sides, and that's
and I think
important.
that either side is wrong. Like if you have all men and you don't have females, you're missing something. But I also think if you have all females and no men, you're right. I think that there's different industries out there that become more female centric, and I think that that's a fail. Also, I think that you need an all white board is wrong. Like you need the difference because that's how you get the whole story.
Right.
And so I think it's important for us to look at that as an industry, as humans, that, we all bleed red and we just come with different perspectives. So it's important to have all different sides. I always looked at being a female as a huge advantage because while the rest of them were talking, technical specs and trying to make it complicated. And I remember seeing competitors' quotes. And there's no way that a person would understand this quote. Nobody, right? It was all about tech speak. So I always wanted to be the person who would give you the quote that you would understand what you're getting. And I still do that today. Yeah. I list out the equipment, I give you little pictures, and I give you a scope to here's what it will do. So either side, any of those sides you're on, you'll be able to understand what you're getting. Because, technology should enhance your life. It should make life better. And if it's hard to use, you have to give an hour training to use any of it. It's, my opinion, is not worth the money.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to make life harder. You want to make it easier. You want to solve problems, not create them, all those things, And
it's not a perfect science either. It won't always work. Right. And I tell people that off the bat, technology is not a perfect science. What you need is someone that's going to answer the phone when you call, who's going to care to fix your problem when it breaks.
For sure. Well, and so part of that perspective that you talk about is in your writing. And I think that one of the things that I always enjoy about what you come up with, and we worked with each other with residential systems, and that's how we met. And now with residential tech today, I'm honored that you continue to work with me on things. And it's kind of at that, when you have an idea, come to me, and I usually say yes. There's the latest one that we have posted is your comparison, which I thought was a good one, of Amazon's Generation 4 Echo Dot and Apple's new HomePod Mini. And the first thing you point out is, did you notice how much they look alike? Which is
odd. I hadn't seen anybody else mention that. Like, so
I know, me either.
TechCrunch and all these other ones, and I didn't see. I'm like, has nobody else caught that these things look like someone called somebody? So someone.
I know. It's like when movies come out, there's like two movies that are like basically the same movie. It's like, how did that happen? So it's like this globe basically on both of them, which is a totally different look than like an Echo Dot, which is a little disc, or the HomePod, the minis are, the Apple products are definitely a different look. So why don't you explain what some of your thoughts were on the advantages or what pros and cons of these products are.
There is some neat features that Apple's adding that, I'll say that I live with Echo. So I live with that, and I use that on a daily basis. So I'm quite used to that one. I think that with some things that Apple introduced was, one of the things was intercom. So intercom was not only, so with Echo, you can announce, Alexa, announce dinner's ready. And then all the other Echo devices in your house will say dinner's ready, because it just records and plays back. With Apple intercom, you could go room to room. So I could go something specifically, but also if you're in the Apple ecosystem, and many people who have one Apple product have multiple Apple products, I could talk to your HomePods or your AirPods that are in your head. I can do it from CarPlay on my way home and say, on my way with Chinese food. And even if you have those AirPods in your head, you're going to hear that as well. So I think that those are some neat, different differentiators. Another one was more of a handoff piece. So if I'm listening to this amazing podcast in my car and I pull in and I just can't miss, any of it, I bring it inside, bring it next to the HomePod Mini, and it would continue to play on that. So there's some different pieces. I think that the biggest one, though, reason that people would go Apple versus Alexa or Amazon is privacy. Apple's made a really big deal that they are the ones that are the most private, that they're not recording your information. They're also not a data mining company like Amazon is. So I think that someone who's really concerned about that, but still wants a voice assistant, an intelligent voice assistant in their world, that would be a reason I could see someone going down that road versus Alexa road.
Do you find that in your, I would imagine it's more in the residential part of your business than commercial, but that you're integrating in voice very much, or do you find it as
we always give the opportunity, because I think, again, right, so technology should be about improving quality of life. That's why I think the only reason that people are buying any of the stuff we do. So I always think of it as how I use it and how it can enhance someone's world. So simple things like, if I'm making dinner and I have raw chicken in my hand, but I want to play music, I can say, Alexa, play the Beatles in the kitchen, and it will play through, which is connected to my Sonos system. So that will just start, and I don't have to wash my hands and I don't have to touch anything. Like, that's a quality of life piece. Or the other one, my number one is add such and such to my shopping list. Add bread to my shopping list. And it doesn't have to be me. It can be anyone in my family. So as soon as the kids run out of something, they know to add it. The husband can add it. Now I run to the grocery store. That is all in one single list. That's a huge, for a working mom, owning the company, raising kids, like that little stupid thing is so important and helps out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an excellent example of the use cases that you're able to come up with that some of my other writers don't necessarily have in their perspective. But what about streaming devices? We've talked about, I know one of the things you pointed out way back when Netflix first had family member options put in their system. So you could say, this is Heather's, favorites or whatever, that type of thing. I was like, hey, I didn't even know that was a new thing. And then there it was. And these are little simple things, but very much of interest to your clients, or potential clients. So
for sure, right.
Do you have I was just going to ask you, do you have a favorite streaming device now that you like to
Well, I currently am living, I only stream off Apple TV now. I've cut my cord. I've written about that 2 different times, once when I did it and once a year later. And I would never go back. So especially today. So we've actually been doing, from a business standpoint, we have Spectrum here in Buffalo. We've been doing Spectrum app on Apple TV. So what that allows for, again, if we go back to quality of life, simple to use, is one input. So now I'm getting rid of a really expensive remote. Now, maybe I'm a bad salesperson because of that, except that the user experience is so much nicer. One remote, Apple, you're using that Apple remote. You can say, show Tom Hanks movies, put your Netflix on it, put your Hulu on it, put your Spectrum on it. You have everything you need. I don't watch live TV, and I try to stay away from the news because it's super depressing and angry.
Yeah.
Because out in the wild, most people are good people.
Yeah.
But so, and then, watching probably mostly Netflix. Depends on the show. I'm like very show centric. I have to go through the whole, we just finished Ozark. I had to go through the whole, every night, what's the next episode? What's going on with the birds?
Right. You're a completist on
yes, I'm a completist.
Yeah.
Same thing with books. I have to read the whole book. never two at the same time.
My neighbor turned me on to The Boys, which is on Amazon Prime, and I was like, I don't want a new thing I have to watch everything of, but it's only 2 seasons, and it's pretty weird. It's a superhero kind of thing, which I'm usually not into, but it's interesting.
We're big Marvel fans in my house, so
Oh, you
I'll check
are?
it out.
Okay. Well, I ran out of steam on Ozark. It was too violent, too dark, and I just couldn't have that and the news in my life. So I stopped watching in the final season, and I do need to finish it. I want to know where we are, but it's hard to go back to.
Yeah, that last episode ends like this.
Oh no. Okay. Well, maybe that'll draw me in again. So not to end on a bummer of a note, but I have to talk to everybody about the way that COVID-19 has changed their business and their personal lives. So you went through, I know I read your article with Lenore Elaine on AV Nation that was really helpful, but you talked about those early days of working from your kitchen table or dining room table, managing your team remotely. How have things evolved? Have you been able to get back to a little bit of normalcy with the way you manage things? Or are you still pretty much doing everything from kind of a distance with your team?
No, we are. I mean, really the only way you can tell that things are different is because we have masks on, out in the field. But other than that, we are at 100%, 120% capacity. What happened is all those jobs that got paused, and especially on the commercial side, contracts that went through where they would have taken an entire year to complete or months to complete, all ended up on top of each other. So now we are at maximum capacity, beyond capacity of trying to complete these jobs on time and on budget. And it makes me grateful and thankful, to have work and be busy, but also to have known well enough to treat people well during that dark time. We didn't furlough anybody. If they wanted to take some time, we did. We offer trainings that they could keep their hours, keep their paychecks, treat people like humans. It's a crazy philosophy. In that, because of schooling and those things too, my other tech person, salesperson, who does most of the residential work, what we did for her is got her a laptop. We mirrored her VoIP phone. She has the exact same setup at home. And I allow her to go from work, actual office to home anytime. Okay. So she's task oriented versus time oriented. And she's actually more hours and getting more done. So I think like as a society, that's a huge piece. If we could trust people more and have them stop looking at it as, I want to pay you this much money per year, and I expect from you this many hours. What if we said, hey, I need you to do this many things. You have to complete these tasks, and I'm willing to pay for that. I think that would make a huge change in our current society. And it would, some people are really good at their time and some people don't manage their time well at all.
Right.
So yeah, we're very busy right now, and I'm again really grateful for that. I worry more about what next year will bring and how much things will change moving forward. Yeah,
I know there are a lot of question marks of how long this thing is going to last, and it's not getting fixed overnight for sure. But it sounds like, at least in our industry, as companies kind of get back on track and are still investing in homeowners continue to just look at their walls, because we're at home a lot more and want to improve things, that things are at least good in our little corner of the world. What are you seeing in terms of actual technical changes? Are you finding that remote services more appealing to clients, or are
the biggest change I've physically seen is the expansion of Wi-Fi networks. So a year ago, if I said to someone, hey, it's going to cost you maybe $1,200 to expand your Wi-Fi to your 3,500 square foot house, someone would have said, like, never call me again, lose my number, you're insane. And now they're saying, can you come tomorrow? Yeah. So something that was really invisible before, that nobody understood and didn't trust, now that they're doing a video call while the kids are watching Netflix. Yeah. And I mean, I've been on those calls where someone's like, hold on, I got to go tell my kids to turn off Netflix because you're cutting out. Right. I get it. It's much more tangible than it's ever been before. So I see that as quite the booming market, and that will continue because a lot of companies are either not going back full time. I think it's going to be this hybrid model as we move forward.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, I will wrap it up on that note. Heather, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
It is always a pleasure. I just wish that we were closer and could have some drinks.
Absolutely. One of these days it'll happen again.
I know.
And also thanks to everyone for joining us. Be sure to comment, share, or subscribe to the podcast. And you can check out all the latest residential tech news at restechtoday.com. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist, residential tech,
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.